The first 14 appearances of Matt O'Reilly's best season, he had 6 goals and 4 assists. Jota had 7 goals and 5 assists. Kühn's got 6 goals and 9 assists.
Yes, he's slapped the ball into the back of the net. Then you need to ask the question, why has he done that? Because somebody has came out in behind him and cleaned them out.
I don't want to get all conspiracy theories on you, but it wasn't happening until it became apparent Rangers were rubbish. Did Celtic finally make their mark in the Champions League against Atalanta? Welcome to this week's episode of 20 Minute Tims. I'm joined by these pains in the arses, Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
What's happening?
Melly,
Who are you?
I'm Melly, what was your final parting words on the last week's episode?
Famously, don't get pumped.
And
not even a please in there, just don't get pumped.
Directed towards Celtic as they set off to Atalanta. So presumably you're happy?
Very happy, yeah. We spoke about it, didn't we? Like if you had it offered me all the scorelines, 0-0 would have been very far down the list. And what I'd have picked,
12th.
I would have said Celtic would go there and get a clean sheet, but absolutely delighted and showed something else of Celtic. We asked last week, could they suffer in the Champions League and get a result? I think they showed that, and starting to maybe look like the Dortmund game was a one-off.
We're at the coal face of the season now, aren't we, Stephen?
Yeah,
We're fighting on all 3 fronts. We've got the Champions League, we've got the League Cup, we've got the league, some tough opponents in there, away games, Euro hangovers potentially to contend with. How did you feel about the Champions League match?
Solid mid-table in the Champions League, baby. That's exactly. We've arrived. We're sitting pretty just now in mid-table. That feels good just now.
I mean, the buzzword for the season has been make a mark.
Yeah.
Make a mark in the Champions League. Do you think that a draw away to Atalanta is making a mark?
Something of a mark, I would suggest, yes. Of course, we're looking for wins at a certain point in the Champions League. That's what Celtic are there to do. We don't want to make up the numbers. But all I wanted to see from Celtic in this Champions League campaign was that they could recover from something like Borussia Dortmund, because what we've found now is that we get one of those generally every year. The circumstances might be different, but the results are very similar over the course of many years. Could we come back from that and actually look like we belong? Now, of course, people are sometimes sensitive about celebrating a 0-0 draw, but that's without context. You have to say that Atalanta are a very difficult team to beat. They're absolutely flying in Italy just now. They're scoring goals left and right. But Celtic managed to limit them, and that was because they dug in and worked extremely hard for each other. They did everything right on the night, and it was a completely different approach to what we've seen before, and that's one of the questions that were posed to Celtic. Now, Brendan Rodgers has come out since and said that, look, believe it or not, the idea was much the same against Borussia Dortmund. It's just things fell apart.
Bound to say that, though, isn't he?
Yeah, it just things fell apart on the night, and I can believe that to an extent. I think that we discussed that at the time about how, look, we can all have a plan going into a game like that, but as soon as the goals start flying in, it becomes panic stations and all of a sudden the game's away from you. So can we put that right? No, there's the answer to that. But can we turn this around and look like we actually belong in the Champions League? And I think against Atalanta, despite the fact there was a draw, that went some way to proving, to me at least as a fan, that we're not here to just completely make up the numbers. An away point from Atalanta and Borussia Dortmund is very good. I would have taken that going into the tournament, so I have to be pleased with that.
I think looking at the Atalanta game, I'm going to struggle with that all evening, through the lens of the Dortmund game, I'm now more inclined to believe Brendan Rodgers that the Dortmund game was a bit of a freak result. Yeah. Things just conspired against us. Things went bad. It was like a Jenga and things just collapsed and it ended up in that sort of result. I'm more inclined now, having seen what we can do against Atalanta, to believe that Dortmund game was a freak result. After the Dortmund game, it was kind of, the onus was on Brendan to prove that was a freak result, and I think he's probably done that now against Atalanta. I think some of the performances in the game were absolutely brilliant. I think defensively, we just did everything we wanted to do against Dortmund. Defensively, we were brilliant. We were not anywhere near as careless with the ball. Our centre halves were massive in the game. AUSTON TRUSTY definitely arrived as a Celtic player.
Yeah, I like to use a Jenga there, by the way. That's nice, yeah, very nice. You don't hear about that often, but I liked it. Yeah, looking at the game, AUSTON TRUSTY arrived. I think, Stephen, you posed last week, or possibly the week before, that maybe we need to see him in our backs to the wall. And that's what the question I posed last week was, can this team suffer? And they went out there and they did that, and they got the result, and that's what we're looking for. We know going into these Champions League away games, that you look at the 4 away games we've got, straight away you look at the Zagreb one and think that's the one we could maybe get something in. The other three, anything you get is an absolute bonus, and that was a bonus. I fully expected to go in there and, to be honest, take a tanking, but this team showed they're made of a bit more steel than maybe they get given credit for. There's not been many games like that where they've had to sit in like that, had to soak things up. But even then, when you're watching the game, it's a lot different because of the nerves, the anxiety that comes with it. After the game, when you look back, you're like, they didn't really have many clear-cut chances the longer the game went on.
Second half especially, I thought it was all right.
Yeah, the longer it went on, the more Celtic sort of looked like we can get something here. I was counting down every 5 minutes from the start to just before half-time to just after half-time, and then you go, right, okay, we're doing well here. And there was maybe minor tweaks, but Celtic just, we always said, what can we learn from a beating like Dortmund? But they learned that don't give away silly goals, don't give away needless passes inside, and keep that compactness that Brendan Rodgers said they tried to get that balance. We had the balance there, and you could see with that sort of tweak of bringing in Adam Idah for Kyogo that the difference that made in Celtic to be able to get out. So it's a hard one when you're sitting in for that long to show your quality on the ball, but I think Celtic got the right balance on the night, and it was a great result.
Our expectations for the Champions League, I don't think, are unreasonable, and it is going into games like this and just thinking or expecting or asking for sometimes just don't look out of place, don't be soft, don't get somebody sent off after 20 minutes. Don't
when
be...
AJ got booked, I was like, here we go, this is it, man.
And see, when I'll admit, when Cameron Carter-Vickers didn't travel, I thought, we've got absolutely no chance. We've got no chance whatsoever here. We're as good as the customary 2 goals down already, the 2 quick-fire goals that we see going in against Celtic all the time. We've as good as conceded those before we've even got in the plane without Cameron Carter-Vickers, but I was completely wrong, and what a showing it was, especially defensively. Talk about Scales and Trusty, and we spoke about Trusty just last week, as you said, Melody, where I thought that maybe he is just one of those guys who's only ever going to look good if the backs are to the wall, because that's what he's used to. He's played for Sheffield United and played for Birmingham before, so he's never really experienced being at a team where you have the most of the ball. And sure enough, just a couple of nights later, he looked like an absolute colossus in there. When the chips were down, when the backs were against the wall, he really stood up. So Scales is very similar in that way. Now, I found myself wondering about, there's a bit of a pattern emerging with certain Celtic defenders. We get these guys in the door, and sometimes questions are asked of them. I mean, Liam Scales spent an entire season having serious questions asked of him, especially from us as well. Trusty, when he came in, didn't look as if he'd settled straight away. Previously, Starfelt, who was always questioned in that he looked a little bit awkward on the balls. If we've got 80-85% possession sometimes in domestic games, these guys are going to see a lot of the ball and they're not going to look the most comfortable. But what each of them has in common is that when it's backs to the wall, penalty box defending, they're all absolutely excellent.
Liam Scales just came on. Liam Scales is just his. I think Brendan called it his superpower, his last ditch defending, in the box defending. And I know we gave Liam Scales a hell of a time last year, and if you backed him last year, congratulations. You're one of these guys that bought Bitcoin at 10 pence. Do you know what I mean? There's no way on earth you guys, there's no way on earth that when Liam Scales' first few weeks in the Celtic team, all these people that backed him, there's no way they saw that. There's not a hope in hell they saw that player, because there was no evidence of it. So congratulations, you'll all be in the YouTube comments, no doubt. But you are the people who bought Bitcoin at 10 pence and now you're billionaires.
Even the manager said that. He said it was one of the biggest surprises of his managerial careers how Liam Scales was performing last season. So these guys are better than Brendan Rodgers. That's what I'm saying.
I'm not having the slander directed at me on that one. But he was absolutely brilliant, man, and it's just he's got such an unconventional defensive style that you could not call Liam Scales a classy defender. You just couldn't say that, but he is solid, he's brave, he's got balls of steel, he throws his head and his body in front of absolutely everything, and he's just doing what needs done. And then on the other side, you had Austin Trusty, pacier than I thought in the game, some good recoveries, and a colossus in the air. And when you were saying maybe he's suited to a particular type of environment or a particular type of game, that's what he's most used to, I thought that is probably the perfect guy we need for Champions League games. It's exactly that sort of player we need, because I've been thinking a lot about Celtic style and how you guys were speaking on the post-match for the Motherwell game, and we'll talk about Motherwell in a bit, but you were talking about how does Celtic adjust to playing these two entirely different styles of teams. And I think the key is just having more players like Austin Trusty that are who are good generally, but in the Champions League they excel in this particular type of game. And obviously it's very, very early to judge, but it does look like Austin Trusty, when he's got shit to do, he gets it done.
And look, of course, and Cameron Carter-Vickers is something of a one-off in the last decade or so, probably stretching back to Virgil van Dijk was the last defender of that style we had who could do a bit of everything. And he is... He can't. I don't think you can go aiming for another Cameron Carter-Vickers alongside him. So we've got these guys beside him potentially, and he didn't play in this game, but we've got Trusty, Scales, and even stretching back to Starfelt before him. They all, as I say, they all maybe look a little bit cumbersome on the ball, but maybe that's just something we need to put up with because their value comes out in other ways, and it is in these games. And I think back to Starfelt against Rangers in that semi-final a couple of seasons ago. And Trusty and Scales. I mean, Scales for an entire season. Scales effectively for an entire year has been a mainstay of that defence. His performances in Europe now, he's got at least 1 or 2 Man of the Match awards in the Champions League. Brilliant displays against Rangers. These guys might look a little bit clumsy on the ball on occasion, but their value comes out in other ways. And we saw that against Atalanta. What a performance it was from the two of them. Now, it's not just about the defence and the goalkeeper, who was also excellent, but the defending as a unit I was really impressed with, because again, a question that was asked of this team, can you not be as wide open as it was against Borussia Dortmund? Can you be compact? Can you make it extremely difficult for a very potent and dangerous opponent? And they answered that question. We speak of one-off results, and hopefully the Borussia Dortmund game is that. Hopefully it was just an extraordinarily bad night coupled with an extraordinarily good night for them, because they've not been in great form either. So maybe it was just one of those nights. The thing is, moving forward, we're going to probably learn even more about the Leipzig, or about the team in the Leipzig game, because every game has been completely different in the Champions League so far. So we're sort of learning as we go. Hopefully, in time, the more games we play, we'll look back in that Borussia Dortmund game and think that was just a complete freak.
Well, learning as we go. Do we get to that 8th game, get through, and then we learn and just get better and better?
Yeah, that's how it works.
We're in the final before we know it. I think it's what Brendan Rodgers spoke about in the summer, was that power, and that was what Austin Trusty brought into that. Looking at the Dortmund game, in that game, it was 2 different styles. Dortmund had players like Ademi who would just run through you and smash it in the back of the net. Atalanta tried to get the ball out wide and get it in, and that's why Trusty and Scales look so good, because it's given them their favourite food, isn't it? Head away anything, and they were brilliant on the night. But also that power in midfield, and I don't mean that by the physicality, but that being able to get up and down, the amount of running off the ball that McGregor, Engels and Hatate all done, something that you could maybe level at guys like Hatate and say, I don't know if he's a guy that we take out in the Champions League for the work rate, but I couldn't fault any of them. No. There was points in the game where Engels was the furthest forward, and when he wasn't back in place, Adam Ida would drop in, or there was times when Maeda would press, so Ida would drop out wide, and Engels ran from being the furthest player forward to getting back into position. Everybody put the absolute maximum in, and we got the rewards for it. In these games, you're going to need a bit of everything. You're going to need that bit of luck. We got that with the header hitting the bar. And we need everybody in the back line to be on form. I think all the defenders were good. Even Baye had his best game as well. So everything just came together for Celtic compared to the Dortmund game, where everything sort of went against us. The good thing was, the Dortmund game, I felt we were masters of our own downfall. This time, we were masters of our
universe.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
He gets it. Listen, do you think Brendan's got a headache in his hands when Cameron Carter-Vickers comes back?
Yeah, I think Cameron Carter-Vickers comes straight back into the team. I think if you can get him back into the team at something approaching full fitness, then I think you do it. But what is a good position to be in is that it's not an absolute emergency. We're not absolutely crying out for Cameron Carter-Vickers to come back in and fix the problems that we're seeing with the defence, because they've actually been playing very well. That's 2 clean sheets in the last couple of games, this week rather, that we're talking about. So I think he comes back in, and I think despite the fact there was an absolutely heroic display, I think it is at the expense of Trusty for now. So, unless there's something to be read into the fact that Brendan Rodgers made a point of saying that Liam Scales has played a lot of football, including international football. I think he was one of, maybe it was just him and Schmeichel who really played most of their international games during the last break. The rest, a lot travelled, but a few minutes here and there. Those two always play.
Brendan called him robust. He says he always makes himself.
Yes.
He says he's been brilliant for me. He always makes himself available for games, and I wondered if that was like a wee coded dig at other players who perhaps, maybe not Carter Vickers, I don't think so, but a wee coded dig at players who pick up knocks, say I can't play this week, or maybe. Because remember there was those rumours about Nawrocki, about we just can't seem to get the guy fit. We can't seem to get him up to speed for any games, and I just wonder if that was Brendan saying the reason he's playing, Mike, and you're not, is because every 2 weeks we speak to you and you've got a sore ankle, a sore leg, you've got a niggle, whereas this guy's just turning up week after week despite how much football he plays.
Yeah.
But it's good to have options now.
He's always available, Liam Scales, but with Celtic right now, as we've said, we've got a lot of games on the horizon. Dundee during the week, then it's a quick turnaround to Aberdeen, then it's an even quicker turnaround to Leipzig. So we've got 3 games in 6 days. I'm
looking forward to that Leipzig game now. Amazing how things change.
All looking good, and with Leipzig way down at the bottom on nil points, while we're sitting there with fully can't even overtake us, lads. So Celtic are going to need to manage all the players around us, and like Stephen said, it's nice not to have Cameron Carter-Vickers and think, right, we need to get him in there and get him playing just so he could get some game time or minutes in the legs, as Brendan loves saying. So we've got options there. We've got options in midfield, as we see. And well, the big problem last season was when Celtic were missing a key player, we just thought we're not going to win this game, even if that was domestically. Whereas in the past week, Celtic have been out with Taylor, they've been without Carter-Vickers, McGregor, and all these guys that Celtic really needed last season. Now we've got a squad, we've got options where guys can come in and Celtic get the victory against Motherwell. But Cameron Carter-Vickers being out last season would have meant Nawrocki or Welsh coming in for a Champions League game, so it was Scales and Welsh. Celtic would have never got a point out there with the centre-back pairing.
There's a lot of questions over a lot of players. I think Alex Bailly's played well the last couple of games, and there's a bit of like debate about whether Greg Taylor's just going to be able to slot right back in the team. I think he will, but I think one of the players weirdly that deserves credit, because another one who I feel really arrived in that game, well, maybe that's a bit unfair, but his performance was definitely quite eye-catching, was Kasper Schmeichel. I thought he was low-key excellent in the game. I really do. I think he was great at controlling the pace of the game. I thought his distribution at times was absolutely unbelievable. I thought this is tactically what a difference I thought that made, having a goalkeeper that can play just such a range of passing from the back, and of course he did the usual goalkeeper stuff, making some good saves.
Yeah,
gone off Joe Hart, have you?
Yeah, well, what did I tell you? As soon as he leaves Celtic, unfollowed.
Forgotten the rat. How dare he retire?
Exactly.
He was commentating, so it was nice.
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, it's nice to hear him talking directly about Kasper Schmeichel as well, because they're so friendly, and Joe Hart's obviously very proud of him, despite the fact that they're almost identical in age. He seems to have this kind of brotherly relationship.
Union?
Yeah, exactly that. Kasper Schmeichel, I remember, Jamie, I think you said on the match reaction on Patreon that we put out that he showed basically every week of his experience as a footballer in that game, and that's when experience becomes extremely valuable. It's not just about being old. It's not just about being over a certain age. That means your experience. If you can take all of your experience from football and harness it into a European performance like that generates just immense pride in the supporter base. And I know it's a nothing each draw, but it's worth so much more than that. Is the context of it is that Celtic can do that in the Champions League. That's what's of value. It's not just 1 point and an away point and a nothing each draw. It's about proving to the support that they can do that, and it's thanks in no small part to Kasper Schmeichel. I heard Totally Football were talking about the Atalanta result from the weekend. I think they smashed something again. I think
he scored 5 in the first half.
So he scored 5 in the first half of the weekend, and someone said, where were all those goals against Celtic? And someone said the Kasper Schmeichel that happened. So I mean, that's a wee bit reductive. It's not just him, but he popped up with the big saves when it mattered. So yeah, a brilliant performance from him again. He's already been largely flawless this season.
It's something for the team to learn from in this game, I think, because Brendan Rodgers said before the match that it's a relatively inexperienced. He goes, it's a very inexperienced team I've got here. And my rebuttal to that would have been, well, Celtic sign players and then they move them on every 2 years. There's been a lot of players here who have been here a lot longer than that. You're really not going to get and plus we don't sign Champions League ready players most times, so you're not really going to get a more experienced Champions League team than the one you've got currently. This is about as experienced as it gets. So the learning for these players, this is another reason why I was so happy with the result. And I'm not going overboard like celebrating a 0-0 draw like it was a win. I'm celebrating the progress. I'm not celebrating necessarily the result, because these players are going to have to learn week to week. They're going to have to learn in that game, right, what do we do differently, and apply it to the next game. You can't frame this Champions League progression stuff as learning over campaigns, because we're simply not going to get that. No. A player will get 1 or 2 and then leave Celtic. It needs to be, what did you learn in the last game and how do you apply it? And the window to that is really, really short. The window for the manager to do stuff like that is really short. I mean, how much training time have we got for Leipzig? No, because we've got 2 games in between and we've just left Atalanta. We've had Motherwell, like
international break in there as well.
International break. The manager's got such tiny windows to get his ideas across about what went wrong and what happened. It's almost, you're talking about a couple of hours on the training park, a couple of days here and there. So I'm just really, really pleased that we progressed the way we did from the Dortmund game.
Sorry to jump in there, but this I feel it's appropriate at this point. This is a subject that we haven't really discussed on the podcast, but what you've just said there is exactly why it's essential that Celtic get their stuff in order behind the scenes, which has been sort of addressed with the appointment of Tisdale, the man from Exeter with hats, has come in, right? This is why it is essential that Celtic fix everything behind the scenes, because it can no longer be about bringing in a manager who oversees absolutely everything. You've just summed it up perfectly there. There's simply no time. There's not enough hours in the day for Brendan Rodgers to be micromanaging every single aspect of the club. He's got to focus on the ridiculous amount of games of football that are ahead of us. So I'm glad that Celtic are finally doing something about that.
Boiling it down to the absolute simplicity, Celtic conceded 7 goals, and then a couple of weeks later conceded 0 goals to a team.
That's better, isn't it?
Much better. You've got a chance then.
Talk me through that again.
So 7,
right,
bad.
Right, okay.
Please don't get pumped. 0, didn't get pumped.
Oh, I get it.
Lovely
stuff.
Right, okay. And in that short space of time.
Patreon.com/20Minute Tims for more of this insight.
More of that.
Are you a fan of stats? Patreon.com/20Minute Tims is where you'll get podcast videos and writing from us and stats.
But boiling it down, as you said, Celtic had an international break after that. They had games thick and fast, and we wanted to see what they'd learn from it. And to cut that right down and cut it back to a point where Kasper Schmeichel was good in the game, but he wasn't blocking shot after shot, making save after save that he simply shouldn't have made. He did what he had to do, and it's that experience you talk about, isn't it? That knowing when to slow the game down, knowing when, do you know what, Dyson Maeda's in, I'll make it a quick throw out here, or just quite simply kicking the ball towards Adam Idah and it landed on him. That didn't happen with us. As good as Joe Hart was, we couldn't do that sort of thing. So
he played my favourite pass of the season, and I don't care if it was deliberate or not. There was a point in the second half, I'm sure it was, where Schmeichel has it, and if Kasper, if you're watching and you met this, let us know in some sort of way, right? Because it was genius. He plays the ball upfield when we're under P, right? And it goes out for a throw-in just by the Dortmund corner flag. And I thought, that is exactly what you need. He played it all the way up the pitch, but not out for a goal kick. I thought,
the old Odsonne Edouard from centre Ibrox that time, booted it straight out for a throw-in up there in the pitch and then just advanced on everyone.
I'm like, that was it. Whether you meant it or you not, let us know, but that was brilliant.
And that was what it was. There was also a lot of perfect from your keeper that he came out and claimed the crosses, or he punched it away, but he got enough purchase on it that it was out. So it was a brilliant performance from him, and it shows why in that position it's not about going out and getting some 25-year-old guy who might come good. Sometimes you're better just going out and getting the best guy for the here and now, and Celtic have done that in the last 2 years, the last 2 goalkeeping acquisitions, and Joe Hart, perfect for Celtic at the time. Kasper Schmeichel, now you see why Brendan Rodgers talks about that sweeper-keeper role so fondly, because if you have another keeper in there, Celtic don't get out and the ball just comes back, and it was so crucial. Yeah, it was so good to watch, and he's very good at playing these low passes into players, but taking out 3 or 4 of the opposition in that, and it just gets Celtic up the park. The amount of times where it was just played into Idah and he's laying it back and Celtic can get out, that's crucial, because we've seen in the past where you just boot it away, you're getting seconds to get back into shape and the ball's coming back in, and it's so difficult. But having these moments where you've got that bit of quality where you can get the ball out, it's crucial for these games, and it showed why that simple ball from him to Adam Idah, it's a direct ball, he holds it up, Celtic can move rather than trying to play it out every time, getting yourself in trouble. The confidence goes down, and then it's wave after wave.
Arne ENGELS, I had a go at him last week. I was sort of doubting the
Did
transfer
a lot
fee.
of goals last week.
I did, but I wanted to mix up. I was feeling
Look a bit stupid now.
I was feeling rambunctious, absolutely not.
That must be a podcast debut for rambunctious.
Probably
That's
is.
impressive.
Do you think he shut me up? Do you think I look foolish now, as Melly said?
I wouldn't go that far, but I think
you.
Not just in that
You
one.
hear that, Melly?
I wouldn't go as far to say that he was an outstanding presence in the game, but I think he played his part. I think he
Worked
brought.
very hard.
Yeah. So did everyone. I think if anyone had been even slightly off, it would have suffered even more in that game. So I wouldn't say he arrived and finally proved his point or proved his worth as an £11 million footballer in a sea of £2 million footballers as we get in Celtic in Scotland. I don't know if he did that, but he proved his worth on the night, if not maybe going forward. I still think it's early days for him. He's got an awful lot of time. Brendan Rodgers felt compelled to come out and say that to everyone. I think he said, look, he's not the finished article. I think that fee is leading people to think that he should be this outstanding talent just now. But what they've bought is a huge amount of potential, and it's up to us to develop and bring that out in him. So I was good against Atalanta, if not, maybe it's not necessarily the game for someone like that to stand out. All we're asking for our midfield, really, is to be sensible with the ball and work very hard, which I think they did. I think he did, and I think both the other guys did as well.
That's what you're looking for. We know we've bought potential here, haven't we?
Yeah.
We know he is a talented player, but Brendan Rodgers is always talking about work hard. You need to do that. And from Arne ENGELS, he was decent on the ball, but it was off the ball where you're going, see if he can marry that talent that he's got. We've seen it in flashes, but also the working hard thing is key element, because we can bring in players and you maybe think, do you know what, seeing the Champions League, he might be a bit of a passenger. Is he willing to put in the hard yards? He done that and more on that occasion, and it just showed the Celtic. I thought ENGELS was great. I thought IDAH was an outlet out there, and he brought players into the game, and AUSTON TRUSTY was a powerhouse at the back. That's your free big money signings from the summer. You get what you pay for these days, and Celtic needed those guys to get themselves into this position where they can go to places like that and believe we can get something.
It's we are really in the thick of it now. As I said at the beginning of the show, you've got the Champions League, you've got the league, you've got away to Motherwell, which is never an easy game. We've got Aberdeen and the Cup at the weekend, and then we've got it's really like all heating up, and we really need these players who are maybe not going to play every week to come in and out and perform. And I think when we look at the Motherwell game and the changes that were made, there's a wee bit more confidence in that now, and especially if that Leipzig game, as you were saying, VARIO comes in, does absolutely fine. AUSTON TRUSTY comes in, does absolutely fine. IDAH starts in place of Kyogo.
He did exceptionally well against Atalanta. I know he got a few grumbles, but I think that specific task he had that night was not necessarily one of those thankless ones, but I think it was a very difficult battle he was in all night, because he was up against their extremely good centre-half, Kühn, I think it was. And I know that Joe Hart remarked in commentary that he was watching that battle, and with reference to the passes, the direct passes to IDAH that Melly spoke about, he said that it seems like Atalanta are welcoming that. They're sort of opening up for that pass because they're backing their defender to win it every single time. So for IDAH to have done anything at all in those circumstances, bear in mind that the centre half,
hell of a shift.
bear in mind that centre half has almost all of the advantage because the game is in front of him, and Adamida is playing with his back to him. I think Adamida stood up to that very well. It might not have been eye catching, he might not have been getting on the end of chances or skinning players or anything like that. But again, it's just one of those essential pieces of work that needed done on the night.
So did you enjoy the game?
Atalanta?
Yeah.
When the whistle went, yes. The final whistle went, yes. But yeah, a sort of sick way you do kind of enjoy those games,
If you thought that was good, Gorgie Miserablist and Guardian columnist Ewan Murray has got news for you, boys.
The golf guy?
The golf guy.
Yeah.
So Celtic obviously beat Motherwell, no Euro hangover. He tweeted, which you can find his content on X. He said, Celtic are £100 million ahead of Motherwell. Brendan Rodgers cannot complain about Celtic and elite Champions League level narrative, as he did again last week, whilst maintaining this theme. Now, look, these guys are paid big bucks to write on football. He writes for the Guardian, no less. The Manchester Guardian, so he is getting big bucks, right? And this is the shit that he comes up with, because did any of you hear Brendan Rodgers complain?
Not a word.
I did.
No, unless the definition of that is now shifted to mentioning it at all, is complaining. Then I suppose he did.
Because my beef for this point that Ewan has fashioned is that the gap exists, but as Ewan trying to say the gap doesn't exist. Brendan Rodgers, as you say, was pointing out that there is a massive gap and it's quite difficult. Well, I don't really understand what he's saying there. If to be as charitable as possible, what is Ewan's point?
Well,
because he's quite good at this, Ewan Murray.
I'll be less charitable. His point is to just wind people up, to be honest. And no, in fact, no, that's giving him too much credit. I think he just likes moaning about stuff. I think he thinks he notices things that other people haven't and likes to bring it to our attention. So he does this quite a lot when it comes to Celtic wins that they shouldn't be celebrating because they've got more money on the pitch. But I think it's a hugely reductive way to look at football. And
we went to Motherwell and smashed them 3-0.
Yeah.
And he's going, see, can't complain about the Euro gap now. You're like, well, but we can't. But one, he's not complaining, and two, the gap exists. And this is a total false narrative that it's not just Ewan Murray. A lot of the media spin it. They say, well, Celtic, they go to Europe and they get battered, and then they come here and they batter other teams. But I don't understand what your point is, because that is exactly what happened.
Yeah, and look, Celtic can't win here with these people.
Well, that's my point. I do understand the point they're making, but you're right. They've constructed this point, but there's no win for Celtic.
No, there literally is not any win, because if they go to the more goals that Celtic score against a team like Motherwell or Ross County, take your pick, Kilmarnock, the more it gets hammered home that you've just got loads of money compared to these teams. So in counterintuitively, 2-0. Anything above 2-0 just hammers home the fact that you've just got more money. I mean, imagine celebrating that sort of stuff. But the other side of that is they go into Europe and lose 7-1 to Borussia Dortmund, and it's embarrassing. These people should be ashamed of themselves, and they're embarrassing Scotland in Europe again. But I thought this is what's supposed to happen. I thought the difference in resources is basically as good as a result. There's no point in playing these games, according to Ewan Murray.
And the math doesn't really math, because if his point is, well, Hearts or Motherwell or Dundee United or for instance, Motherwell spent £1 million this summer and Celtic spent £20 million this summer.
Yeah.
They're 20 times better than Motherwell, and okay, right, that's fine, but that's still only 19 million quid we spent on 5 or 6 players. Those are 5 million players. When we go into Europe and we play Dortmund and all that, they spend £30 million on one player, and they've got a team full of superstars that sell for 50, 60, 70 million pounds. So the gap it's not the same, although it's the same in terms of maybe on paper and the math. When you actually look, well, we've only spent that on one player or two players or a whole squad, whereas our Champions League opponents spend 40-50 million pounds on one player.
So again, just the rough maths of it, what did you say, 1 million versus 20 million, so that's 20 times. So if a team had 20 times Celtic's budget, think of the players that would be on that pitch. That's completely ridiculous. Hundreds and hundreds of millions.
I just don't understand this sort of press instinct that Ewan's shown here to sort of, as you say, Stephen, create a miserablest, unwinnable situation for Celtic, because there's no joke, there's no hidden truth, there's no lie here, Melly. The reality is Celtic, more often than not, do very, very well at home, and quite often will suffer to higher resourced teams in Europe. But also what it does is arguments like that, I kind of feel like it takes away a lot of credit from the likes of Motherwell and that, because he's just saying, Melly, we're never going to win anyway. It's pointless for you turning up. Yeah,
does that mean Motherwell, you probably should win 1 in every 10 against Celtic Rangers when it gets down to that? You might have better resources, but could you played more attacking against it? There's always a way around this to get out of it, isn't there? And I think it's just reductive. Like, that was a good week for Scottish football in Europe. All 3 teams came out of it with good results. That should be applauded. We shouldn't be then going back to the domestic game and going, should you really celebrate that victory? There's no point to being a fan is watching your team play well. I've seen over the years that European hangover exists. Everybody falls foul of it sometimes. Celtic went out there and made light work of Motherwell, who are having a fairly decent season. Celtic missing Kühn, they were missing Taylor, Carter Vickers, McGregor. That's 4 players that would definitely start for Celtic, not in the starting lineup, and they went and made light work of a Motherwell team who've been doing well. So celebrate that all you want, Ewan. Just because you can't celebrate because your team's bottom of the league.
He does stuff like this all the time, though. I remember when he made the point about it was a Scotland game.
Oh man, this was the most ridiculous point.
So there was a Scotland game where he had, as usual, just digging away looking for miserable things about the lineup. He'd made the point and I'll get to the wording of the tweet in a second, but his overall point was that not many of the Scotland team were domestic-based players. So what that in effect means that SPFL aren't producing players for the Scottish national team. That's not the issue though, because he's saying that that's a bad thing. And the way he worded it was, I don't know what this says, but it's not good.
Yes.
What I would suggest, first of all, is that if you don't know what you're saying, don't say it at all.
Yeah, you
right?
don't need to tweet it.
First of all, work it out in advance what it is your point is, and then sort of decide from there whether it's worth tweeting. Don't just tweet it and then work backwards from there. But the point that he thinks he's making is not what it doesn't stand up. So the reason that there's hardly any SPFL players in the Scotland team on any given fixture is that they're all playing at a level higher than that. Correct. So that is a good thing for Scotland.
Someone
it's because,
said to him,
because they're all playing in England and Italy and the likes. How many of the Argentina World Cup winning team do you think played in Argentina?
Don't know, mate, but it's bad.
But it'll be near zero because all of their players are playing in England and Spain and Italy and Germany. It's because you want your national team to be full of players from the highest levels you can possibly play at.
Someone else picked up on this and invited him on a podcast. He was on Graham Spears' podcast, The Bold Year, and he said, and Graham went, I've noticed you say this a lot, but what does it mean? And Ewan went, oh well, I don't know, but I just don't think it's very good. And I'm like, you're a journalist. We're here shitting about. You're the journalist.
Really excellent Graham Spears there, by the way.
Was that good?
Really very good.
Thanks very much.
It's Halloween. That's kind of your costume.
I could have dug out the tweed and the brogues
the
and
elbow patches,
and the Rangers scarf and dressed up as Spears. Scottish football journalists love sort of trying to manufacture and create little opinions that I just don't think stand up to a lot of scrutiny. In fact, it's a lot of the reasons why we started this podcast. Another one, Melly, is a bold take of mine, and I think me and you are going to disagree on this because everyone I speak to disagrees with me on it. It's Lennon Miller, and I just think that the idea that this guy should be playing his football at Motherwell is absolute bunkum. And I just think it's a little story that a lot of his dad's friends and ex-pros and ex-players like, because Scotland's quite twee and colloquial, and we want the guy playing for Motherwell. But I would put it to you that if any other promising young player had the opportunity to go to an elite, a top, a better club, any young sportsman at any sport, or anyone in any sort of business had the opportunity to go work with the best coaches, dietitians, managers, strength trainers, you name it, the best facilities, more money. I just don't see anyone going, nah, turn all that down and ply your trade at Motherwell for a wee bit longer. That guy needs to get out at Motherwell as soon as possible, because training on whatever, I don't know, potato field at Motherwell train on, right? With the coaches that they have got, it's not a mark on what he would be getting at Celtic or any other top club. I don't think Rangers can afford them now, and I do wonder whether or not Celtic can afford them now. But I'm so curious about the guy's obviously good enough. He was great against Celtic. Yeah. He's been great every time we've seen him. But there's this sort of prevailing narrative, well, he needs to go and get games. Aye, all right. He'll play. If he was at Celtic, he'd be playing. Just like Luke McCowan's playing. So the question that he would never play at Celtic is not true. He'd have better coaches, managers, all that stuff that other mentioned. I just think that it's on the verge of he being badly advised. Now, if he doesn't leave in January or doesn't leave in the summer and go to a top club, he's wasting his time.
Looking at the summer, it's probably likely he'll go then, possibly January. I'd love for Celtic to sign him. I think he's at that age and that sort of profile where you're looking at him going, if we don't move now, we'll probably miss our chance. And we've seen it in the past that I always look at it. See, if you go up against a player and he stands out, then I think that's when Celtic should make the move. We've seen it in the past with guys like Turnbull, John McGinn, Lewis Ferguson, guys that get goals or look like scoring against Celtic and Rangers and the top teams in the league. He's doing that now, and I'd like to see him come to Celtic. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. It's difficult because if he's looking at his career, the best thing for these players, for me, is to play first team football. And I know at some point he will outgrow Motherwell. I wouldn't say he's at that point yet, because he's only 18. He's got to be a wee bit more consistent, and if he moves to Celtic, he maybe plays 1 in 3 games if he's lucky, if he's playing well. Motherwell, he's playing week on week, and we've seen from the players that have been leaving Scottish football over the last few years that it seems to be happening more often. I'm failing to see MD that's leaving Scottish football and it really working for them. I'm not talking about Lewis Ferguson or that. I'm talking about guys like Ben Doak, the guys that go that wee bit younger at 17, 16, 15. A lot of them are getting to 19, 20 now, and there's guys like Liam Morrison, who's plying his trade at like Wigan. Was him going to Bayern Munich the best option? Barry Hepburn left Celtic, went to Bayern Munich, and I think he's playing in the League of Ireland now. I might be wrong in that, but it's not worked out for a lot of these guys. So first team football in the top league might be the best thing for them, and then hopefully they can go through the filter of Celtic. So plenty of time left for the guy. If I was Celtic, I'd be trying to get a deal maybe done for January or done for the summer, but I think he's going to be that next one.
I think we've missed the boat. I do think that's kind of where my frustration comes from. I think this sort of, in the summer, Celtic didn't get him. And first of all, I don't believe for a minute that any top club came in from in the summer. Despite what people are saying, he's well advised, his dad's really looking after him, he's told him he needs to stay at Motherwell and get games. Aye, that's true, right? But Motherwell not a rich club, and if some team came in with 5, 4, 5, 6 million for him in the summer, I just fail to see how Motherwell would be able to turn that down. So following on from that, my point is Celtic probably should have got him in the summer, and the guys that have gone abroad that have played, like the ones you pointed out, like the Hickeys and the Fergusons and all that, the one thing those guys have in common is Celtic either waited too long to get them or dilly-dallied and didn't pick them up. And if we're to be that filter, we probably should have got Lennon Miller at that summer there. If we want him, I think we need to go and get him in January. I think come next summer, when the word is out that he's ready to move, and it's about time, because I probably think it was last time we'd have done him better, I think we'll probably miss out on him, and it'll be another sort of frustrating one that slipped through our fingers a wee bit.
Potentially, but that's where it's a difficult one, because I think the key was, right, he came in last season, he looked really good. Can he sustain that? And he's just turned 18 as well, so he is at a very young age. Celtic in the summer, it's difficult because he is playing well and he's playing very well in the league. Is it a better option to go and get Luke McCowan, who's a guy that can come in the here and now, and then hopefully you get Lennon Miller down the road? If it works out well for Celtic and we get him further down the line, possibly, but if not, I'm just not sure it was right for all parties that Celtic went and got him in the summer there.
I forgot to ask, was Brendan more pragmatic against Atalanta? Because I can't believe I missed that point out, because he had a wee dig at it post-match, Stephen. He was like, maybe I wasn't pragmatic enough for did you not hear that? Aye. No. He says, maybe I wasn't pragmatic enough for people post-match, and I thought, you just can't avoid getting that wee dig into him.
It's brilliant how much he pretends that none of this stuff gets to him, and it comes leaking out all the time. Whenever he gets a chance to have a wee dig at people that may have slighted him, every single chance he jumps on, despite the fact, I don't care, I don't listen to any of this stuff, people can say what they like. He's just banking it off, just frying it all in.
That's why his wee notepad.
It's like Michael Jordan when they said that. That's when it became personal.
When he said that about me in that forum that 40 people used, I took it personally. So
those 3 dicks on that podcast had a pop at me.
I don't know. He claims that the idea was pretty much exactly the same from Atalanta to Borussia Dortmund, but the outcome was very different. I think we can leave it at that.
We mentioned Luke McCowan, Martin Melly, and that wee discussion we had about Lennon Miller there. I thought McCowan's he's a good wee player. He is. He's just. I was doubtful about him when we were linked with Luke McCowan. I was like, we can't seriously be trying to sign the Dundee captain at 27. He's just not that sort of profile. But it turns out that apparently he's been slept on, because he's been brilliant. He's been brilliant for us when he came in, and it's a player who's come in place of probably Callum McGregor. But Callum McGregor got a rest, or he was injured in the warm up for that game, whatever the case may be. But he came in and didn't look out of place. And I thought to myself, well, we've maybe got finally able deputies, him and Bernardo, for Callum McGregor. If we need to rest Callum McGregor, he needs to get some time out of the side, because he plays far too much football historically. And Luke McCowan, I just thought, that's an able deputy right there.
He definitely was, and I don't think he meant it, but wee things like calling him a good wee player is doing him a disservice, because he's just a good player. Yeah. Every time I've seen him...
I'm 6'2".
If you believe that, listener. When you seen him come on in all the games, I think you mentioned it last week, Stephen, about it's not the hard work and the grit and determination he's put in. It's the technical things that look good, the best for him. And he's just looked like a guy that's came in and not had any time to settle. And he came in at a good age at Celtic, where you're probably thinking, 26, is that sort of past that sort of player we're looking at? But we've brought in a guy who was outstanding for his team and has come into Celtic and just looks like he's a ready-made SPFL player. Whether he hits the heights in Europe, I don't know, but he did well when he came on against Atalanta, and this is why he was brought in. He was brought in to come into games like this, and in his sort of cameos that he's made, you're looking at it going, kind of deserves a start, but just all the players ahead of them are maybe better players, and that's fine. But we've seen in this run right now that Celtic are on, the games come thick and fast. Cal McGregor was probably due to start the game at the weekend but dropped out. He comes in and it doesn't really affect Celtic's momentum. They keep going. He comes in, looks good and gets a goal, and you just can't help be delighted for the guy
goals,
because it was, I said in the match reaction, it was Rogic-esque, the sort of finish. He just picked it up there, puts it home with the left foot, and you're like, he's sort of arrived as a Celtic player. But I wasn't as if he's looked terrible in the games. That's his first goal, and I'm delighted for him because his performances he's put in have deserved that, and he deserved that start of the weekend.
He was scoring a lot of goals last season, and he was on my radar vaguely for that reason, because that's impressive.
I think he had most goals outside the box in the league.
Oh yeah, I could believe that. I wasn't aware of that stat, but I could certainly believe it. So scoring that number of goals from midfield or from various positions for a team like Dundee is always going to be impressive anyway. But I can't say he was really on my radar fully until that hilarious game where Dundee drew nothing each with Rangers after all that controversy with the flooded pitch and all that. Do you remember? That scandal that was going on. So there was that game where they drew nothing each with Dundee and then they lost to Ross County or thereabouts. It was that hilarious part of the season. He was outstanding in that game, and I thought, right, that's maybe something to keep an eye on. However, I did find out that it was him and Aberdeen's McGrath who were on that kind of radar as maybe the outstanding talents outside of the big two. And I thought, right, both very, very good players, but it would be incredibly un-Celtic for them to go out and get a player of that age domestically. I just don't see them doing that very often. But I was completely wrong. They went out and got McCowan, and he's slotted in absolutely perfectly well. So I get that point about how people look at him as a fighter, and he's going to fight for the cause, the grit and determination and all that, because he's a Celtic fan. But that's been slightly patronising to him in terms of his overall ability as a footballer. I think he's a very good player. Looks
very
like
see, when I say good wee player, what I mean is, I suppose on that way, tidy. He's a very tidy footballer.
All this Lennon Miller chat, Luke McCowan, we missed out on Connor Barron in the summer. He's the main man in there in Scotland.
Oh well, now that you've mentioned it, we were going to try and refrain from talking about VAR and referees, but play my motherfucking mute. Damn it! I didn't want to swear on the podcast. I'm just going to go with it. Right, just VAR. Right, listen. What's going on? Help me explain, because it was for those who don't know, we've got a Connor Barron incident to talk about, and we've got the Dysonmaid handball to talk about.
And it's not that incident rumoured online. See that picture of him on a lamppost that people put.
You wouldn't VAR that. You wouldn't video that.
It's not that incident we're talking about. Just to be absolutely clear, we're not going to talk about it, but just you'll find it on X where there's a lot of good stuff. It's not that incident involving Connor Barron that we're talking about.
I don't even think you're allowed to video things like that. Jesus.
Certainly not. I certainly hope not.
Anyway, listen, we'll talk about the VAR, right? We'll talk about, you threw me off with that. We'll talk about, are you talking about the...
Yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah. Fucking, right. Connor Barron, high foot incident, very similar to the Yang one. We were keeping our eye on it. We're keeping our eye on this. We kept that Yang thing. We put that in our back pocket. We says this will definitely come up again. This sort of thing will definitely come up again, Stephen. And it did. Yeah.
So a refresher on the Yang thing. What we said at the time was that Yang was naive there. So the Hearts game last season, where he was sent off for a high boot, right, and that game that turned into an absolute fiasco eventually, right. So a refresher on that is that Yang was sent off for a high boot when Yang wasn't moving. So the ball is coming towards him, as is the Hearts player. He puts his boot up to try and control it. The Hearts player runs into him, and the rationale given at the time was, well, you can't put your boot up there. So we're led to believe then that all that stuff they say about violent conduct, excessive force, that doesn't count. And this is simply about you raising your boot above a certain angle from your hip. And that's a straight red card. It hasn't really panned out that way, has it at all? There's been lots of those incidents, and subsequently, very, very few have led to direct straight red cards. And since Yang, there was loads of different examples at the time, comparing it to very similar examples where Yang had his foot in the air, but so did loads of other players. And there was one, remember, there was a Yakimakis one from a couple of seasons ago as well, right? So there's loads of them all the time, and it's come back up because Conor Barron did exactly the same thing. However, I would make the distinction that Barron was moving towards the player. His boot was travelling towards the player. Yang's wasn't. But what we all had to suck up at the time was that, you just can't put your boot up there. It's a straight red. Sorry.
Yeah.
End of. Fact. You cannot put your boot up there. You cannot lift your boot. It's a straight red card, and that certainly hasn't panned out that way. So what we're left again talking about is that potentially clubs are refereed to different standards than others. And you can say, no, they're not. That's all tinfoil hat stuff. That's all conspiracy theory rubbish, right? But the trouble is, if you're saying that every week, time to reevaluate.
That Hearts game last season, without overgoing old ground, right? That Hearts game last season was a fiasco of refereeing, an absolute disgrace of refereeing. And then this Conor Barron thing, it was as clear as day for me when I saw the replay. I couldn't believe it. And then all you do is you compare it to the Yang one, which is another high profile thing. And as you say, Stephen, all this, and this is what gets to me, all the stuff you're told about why you need to accept these decisions, right? They just lift excuses off the shelf. This one. You can't do that. You can't put your foot up there. You need to be careful. You need to watch. As soon as it happens again in a Conor Barron situation, none of that exists.
No.
None of that exists. I'll be really looking forward to seeing this one in Willie Collins' YouTube channel.
If it makes it.
Well, if it makes it, because what one did the referees, and for those who don't know, the referees produce like a monthly little video clip.
They go weekly, don't they?
Well, they go weekly, do they?
They need to go weekly.
Oh, they need to go weekly. They need to bring it up. And some of these decisions are notable by their absence. Daizen Maeda, though, that's definitely going to be in the next review panel. Because that is, to me, another bizarre decision. So, Daizen Maeda, running at the box, falls over, outstretched hand. I think he did have a wee cheeky tap with the ball. I think he moved his hand a wee bit to get it into the goal. So it was...
He was smiling. In the angle from the behind the goal, it looked as if he had a big grin on his face as it was trickling over the line.
So that's chopped off because you can't palm the ball into the goal, right?
No.
So
some finish,
right? So they chopped that off. But they didn't then, Melly, look at why he was on the ground in the first place.
No, it just seemed to be that Daizen Maeda has handled the ball and the goal is ruled out. Took a while to come to that conclusion, even though from the angle you're getting at Fir Park, always good for cracking angles, by the way, Fir Park. From the angle you knew as soon as that went in, something doesn't look right here. How did the ball end up going in that direction at that speed when Daizen Maeda's legs were on the ground? So you knew something went down. As soon as you see the replay, yes, he's slapped the ball into the back of the net. Then you need to ask the question, why has he done that? Because somebody has came out in behind him and cleaned them out, but that was just forgotten about, as if
apparently he was offered a VAR review and he didn't take it. I'm not sure if that's completely true. I heard that's one of these things that you hear just after the game. So I heard it on the radio just after the game. I didn't hear it at the time, obviously. Someone posted the clip online. They were saying that he was offered a VAR review. David Dixon didn't want a VAR review for the penalty. So whatever happens, he's got to go to the monitor. Surely he's got to go to the monitor for that.
Does that not make a mockery of the whole thing then? Because if the VAR official is telling it, I think you might want to have a look at this, and he goes, no thanks, why is it here?
Yeah.
And why have we seen in so many decisions that referees get decisions which they think are completely right, get called over, and then pretty much every time change their mind because it gives them a new way of thinking? Plus, the VAR footage was terrible. All you seen was Daizen Maeda being bundled
Replays
over.
Were terrible.
You didn't get
James
to see
McFadden
the full
was
thing.
confused at half time. He was like, it kind of looks like a penalty, but the replays were given were absolutely terrible.
Right, Steve, I want you to hold that incident in your mind and let me remind you of a very similar incident. Austin Trusty, St Johnstone, bundling a player over that he didn't see.
Right, yeah.
And that's enough to award a free kick for the St Johnstone player and chop off a Celtic goal but this is not a free kick for the Celtic player, aka a penalty in the box.
Both comings togethers of big men. That's all that happened there. Both are coming together that Celtic have lost out on both of them.
Aye, this
Poor
is...
Dyson to be top goal scorer by now.
I know that's two. He's a chopped up. Look, the point is, we're trying not to moan about referees so much, but this weekend we're back into realms of make it make sense.
Yeah.
And I know that Willie Collum has introduced this thing. There's a panel of 5 people made up of ex-pros and ex-referees and people who watch the game, and it's like the dubious goals panel from years gone by in the Premier League, and they decide whether or not the referee got the right decision, and they have these reviews every month, and the Austin Trusty incident was missed off that review last time. But as Ben said, it's going to have to be weekly, because that this weekend was just a complete mystery. And honestly, I don't want to get all conspiracy theories on you, but it wasn't happening until it became apparent Rangers were rubbish. Damn it. Send up the bat signal. Rangers are crap again.
Let them have it. Let them have their piddly wee decisions on it as Celtic are roaring over the horizon.
It makes no difference anyway, does it?
Before we go, I wanted to make mention of a guy who hasn't necessarily stood out this week, but I wanted to mention Kühn, because I think he's very quietly going about having an absolutely outstanding season, to the point where it's maybe going under the radar.
You were ferociously Googling something. You didn't tell us what you were looking up before the podcast recorded.
Yeah, so just loosely.
It was that Conor Barron thing.
You didn't Google that, did you?
No, that's what...
You better burn your phone.
It's in the office Wi-Fi now as well. We're getting all sorts of adverts. But Kühn, I think he's very
chappy.
Kühn is very quietly going about having a very good season. I think that the numbers he is putting up at the moment is extraordinary, and despite the fact he hasn't necessarily stood out this week, he came off the bench against Motherwell and created yet another goal. He set up Adamida's goal, and at this point, 14 games into this season, if we agree that prior to Kühn and now could be potentially Hatate, Engels, right? If we agree that prior to this season, the main creative drivers for Celtic were Jota and Matt O'Reilly, and who are no longer here, Kühn is putting up numbers just now that could potentially eclipse both of those guys in the best seasons of their career, the seasons that led to them being bought at the end of it. And I think it's been pretty extraordinary so far. So just the first 14 appearances of Matt O'Reilly's best season, he had 6 goals and 4 assists. Jota had 7 goals and 5 assists. Kühn's got 6 goals and 9 assists. Now, to put that into context, Matt O'Reilly, who was Player of the Year by a country mile last season, despite the fact he didn't get his hands on the trophy, right?
Who did win that?
Shankers.
Oh, God, I can't believe I forgot that.
Let that never be forgotten, by the way. But he got 18 the entire season. Kühn has got 9 in his first 14 appearances. What's extra eye-catching about that is that he came off the bench in 3 of those.
That's right, aye.
2 assists against Falkirk when he came off the bench, and came off the bench against Motherwell and got another assist. So the numbers he is putting up this season so far are unbelievable, and it just seems to be happening on a week-to-week basis. That's an incredible return for barely even a quarter of the way into the season.
Right.
Okay.
I wrote off Scales.
Yep.
Became a very good player. You wrote off Kühn. He's became a very good player. Right off Engels or something.
That's the way to do it. Yeah.
Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to end the podcast. You need to write somebody off so they come good. So.
Oh right. Who needs it? Who could be doing with?
You'd have said Trusty last week, but
No,
he came in.
that's
What about Baye?
Aye, yeah.
No, because that means he'll take Greg Taylor's place.
All right.
So.
KASPER SCHMEICHEL.
There you go.
Fat mess.
And on that blobshell, we shall wrap up. Thank you so much to everyone who joins us on this weekly nonsense. Thank you in particular to the people that support us on Patreon. If you would like extra content, videos, podcasts and writing, patreon.com/20minutetim. Sign up on the website, not through the Apple app, because Apple will steal some of your money from it.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for watching and listening.